There it is.
So welcome all, maybe for some back here in the session of online assessment, for those who have been participating already yesterday, and for others, most welcome to join to these well, shown to be very interesting sessions that we started yesterday. To refresh your mind, yesterday we started with the focus on assessment design and assessment futures, with a presentation by Claus-Dieter Rosada and Joko and Jose, focusing on the assessment design and assessment futures. Main conclusion was there that okay, online education is growing, and also online assessment is there to stay. That was one of the conclusions, and we all need to come with a strategy and approaches on organizing online assessment. And we discussed elements of acceptance by students. Also, is it about preventing students to cheat, or building a solid system guaranteeing that the assessment is organized well? Different approaches were presented. Also, emphasis was given on transparency with the students on what is happening, and also being in contact and dialogue with students, and fading in the approaches rather than bombarding students with a lot of new regulations. We have a publication that is the result of this special interest group on online assessment that has taken the work for 1.5 years, resulting in this publication. And I guess Stefan will publish that link in the chat. Soon we will also have a dedicated website on online assessment, in which you not only find the content of this report worked out in this website, but also the opportunity to have more good practices uploaded. So if you are triggered by these sessions of this week, we ask you to come forward with good practices that we can add to this website. For this afternoon, we have 2 more presentations with a focus on trust, privacy, and ethics. And if you participated yesterday, you would have recognized that this is really an integral part of organizing online assessment. The topic of trust, privacy, and ethics is a major topic to be tackled by all universities developing a strategy on this and presenting online assessment to their students. The more important, therefore, that we have 2 strong examples to present to you today. The first is by Ekaterina from the Open Universiteit of the Netherlands, and then followed by Henrietta Carbonel from UniDistance in Switzerland. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ekaterina. Somebody has an office dog, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much. So you can see my presentation now, right?
Yes, we see it well.
Okay. Yes, I'm very pleased and honored to present today. I'm the second author of this chapter. The first author, Dr. Jose Jansen, unfortunately could not present today. So I will do my best to be clear. And also, if there are questions, I want to answer those questions. How do I come to the next page?
You share the slides yourself?
Yes.
I think just with the arrows.
It does not work.
The arrows, or enter maybe, I don't know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, when the pandemic started, we were all more or less pushed to look for solutions to continue doing what we were doing. Also, educational institutions were pushed to look for solutions to continue providing their educational services without delay and the loss of quality. And also here at the Open University, we switched to online assessment with online proctoring very quickly.
I'm sorry to interrupt for shortly, Ekaterina. I get some messages in the chat that the sound is not optimal. If you could, I don't know,
Yes, speak louder.
Yeah, would certainly help. Or could I have closer to the microphone?
Yes, okay. Like this, is it better?
Yes, I can hear you well now. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Then I will continue like this. So also here at the Open University of the Netherlands, we were pushed to switch to online assessment with online proctoring. And software that we used was software that provided live proctoring and track and review. So in our case, we used track and review proctoring, and this use different recordings, screen recording, and sound recordings, and internet visits. Students were also asked to show their ID to identify themselves. So this all was quite complex for students and also teachers, and also students were asked to provide quite a lot of personal data. Of course, all parties involved, and first of all, students wanted simply to be able to trust this system, this process, and also to have an qualitative indication of their competence and their knowledge. Of course, so to build trust is not that simple. And in the context of e-assessment, there are different levels of trust according to Edwards. And my presentation is also built referring to these different levels. So trust in technology, deployment of technology, organization itself, privacy and personal data, as I said, because a lot of personal data is collected, and also reliability and fairness of this assessment process. So, and to build trust is not simply to build trust on one level. So if you don't trust technology, you will probably also do not trust deployment of this technology. Or I can give you also another example from the Open University of the Netherlands. So students objected to use of second camera. Due many different reasons, because it is too complex, or because they feel distrusted, or simply because they feel that their privacy is violated. So, and how to build trust and privacy without building trust and technology, because this second camera provides complementary data that can be used to better detect fraud and to reduce the number of recordings that can be seen as invalid. So this kind of dilemmas quite between privacy and quality quite difficult. And but still they're here and we should think about them. Of course, this issue with the second camera also touches basic legal principles regarding privacy. And the first one is legal ground, and the second one is proportionality. So these two principles I will explain. GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, that came into force in 2018, established 6 legal grounds for personal data processing: consent, but also contract, legal obligation, vital interest, task carried by a public authority, or legitimate interest. And consent is only that is really based on voluntariness, and all other grounds are more or less necessity. So in this case, collection of personal data is really necessary, and to achieve particular purpose, it is really necessary to collect personal data. This is what it means. So, and of course, ethics come into play. because in different countries, these legal grounds were interpreted differently. So in some countries, it was, for instance, prohibited to use video recordings in the context of e-assessment. In some other countries, it was allowed on the basis of legitimate interest. For instance, in the Netherlands, some universities did use this legal ground because they had to check who is in the front of the computer. So, and also here at the Open University of the Netherlands, it was also allowed to use video recordings on the ground of public interest, which means, yes, university had to continue providing their services, and students get their degree and their diploma. So it was in all interest to continue to do it in this way. So it was really necessary to do it like this. And of course, in this case, students were, let's say, more or less pushed to apply this technology, to share their personal data, and even now, with consent, there are still group of students who feel like this. For example, students with special educational needs who simply cannot come to a study center. So they also have simply no choice. So they have this technology and use this technology to make assessment process possible. So there is simply no choice, which is another ethical dilemma. And so I will continue this presentation focusing on each level. And the first level was trust and technology. So here we see what was suggested or adopted already by teaching universities in Europe. And I will also give you some examples from here, from the Open University of the Netherlands. When we talk about trust and technology, so it was first of all suggested to focus on usability and ease of support. And of course, there should be also guidelines and support for students. For example, here at the Open University of the Netherlands, students were able to do a test exam, a system check, and also they had written instructions on how to proceed. So all this were provided in advance. They could exercise before the examination started. And what we learned from the evaluations, that students missed a kind of notification that everything went well. So at the end, they wanted to know for sure that their recordings saved and stored, and they can close the system. So this is something for the future, let's say. Then trust in the deployment of technology. Yeah, what was suggested, of course, to be transparent, how you use this technology. There can also be differences in different courses and assessment designs. And for example, here at the Open University of the Netherlands, we have a special tile on our website for students where they can find all this information on e-assessment. And there are also all documentation, so where they can also find necessary definitions. What is fraud? What is irregularity? And the problem is, of course, that it is quite difficult to prevent all this at the moment it happens. So if you're in a study center, so you're still with a teacher or investigator who can notify, for example, books are not allowed on the desk. But when you're at home, it is almost not possible. So, and afterwards, you will discover that you've done something that was not allowed. So it is very important to communicate this in advance and to communicate this in a clear way. And of course, also trust in the competence by teachers and all who are involved. So these people involved in this process should also be trained to be able to perform this professionally. Then we go to the trust in the organization itself, and this is much related to the reputation, general reputation of the organization in terms of quality of teaching and learning services, but also it is important that there is a balance. At the moment you apply assessment, balance your academic standards with ethical considerations. And one of those considerations, and I said, related to students feeling stress or distrust. This should be proportionated. And of course, we can say that this academic standards not only in the interest of the institution itself, but also very much in the interest of students. Yes, so, and for example, here at the Open University of the Netherlands, and all our documentation on online proctoring, the interests of students are also central. So it is explained that, of course, the institution will look for software which is user-friendly, easy to deploy, and students are able to provide qualitative recordings, but also that their interest and interests of their institutions in proportion. So this is explicitly mentioned there. And of course, trust and personal data processing. So it was suggested to pay attention to security issues, of course. So and choose for software which is indeed secure. And if it is not secure and there are risks, then you can switch to another software immediately. So there should be an alternative for this case. Of course, documentation should be in order, and for this, yeah, the legal office should be involved. They should check all licenses and agreements, and also compliance with GDPR. And of course, if it is possible, and now it's possible, so students should have a choice. So if they prefer to go to a study center, it should be possible, but if they prefer to stay at home, it should also be possible. And this is, of course, touches transparency. So if you still do it at home, be aware of what data collected, how it is collected, stored, and shared. For example, the Open University of the Netherlands, during the pandemic, as I explained already, we used record and review proctoring on base of public interest. And now we still use this option, but then we switched to consent, informed consent. And there is a definition of informed consent. Taken from the GDPR, this is any freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous indication of the that subject wish to signify his or her agreement to the processing of personal data. So, and the procedure itself has two purposes: of providing relevant information, and this is mostly through the information letter, and also documenting students' consent through a consent form. And the GDPR is quite strict about what should be included in this information letter. There are quite some information requirements. But to provide this information is does not mean that consent is informed. So we know from cookies, for instance, that this information is very often ignored. And from research, we know that there are quite some ways to stimulate students to read this information, to take it seriously, to consider their consent decision. So of course this should be clear, and the GDPR also suggests to use plain language, but they can also be icons or anything else to help to go through this information and understand this information. So this is also suggested by GDPR, but this is rarely used actually. But yeah, there is research going on and many opportunities to improve the quality of the informed consent procedure. So, and in case of e-assessment, we know, for instance, for identification, also sometimes biometric data is collected, and for this biometric data, you also need to have explicit consent, which means there should be a button, and students should click on this button explicitly to provide his or her explicit consent. This is a little detail, but also quite important in this specific context. And of course, trust in reliability and fairness, the assessment process. So of course, the main purpose of assessment process is to provide an indication of students' knowledge and competence, but there are quite some threats. So can be that person taking exam is not the intended person. And also that this person is somehow assist during the assessment process. So of course, this should be prevented through identification and authorship verification. But the question is, yeah, how to balance. We're back to this question. So as I explained already, a second camera, is it always sufficient to achieve this main purpose? And also students who feel stressed and distrust, do they perform not as good as study center? This question is important, and for example, these questions maybe also interesting to mention. We do not have these questions when we have a real life situation. So students also identify in the study center by their teacher, but this is not a problem at all. But when you do it an online environment, this feels not that safe, secure, and maybe uncomfortable. So these are questions very specific for this context. And of course, the most question, do we focus on this surveillance strategies, or do we need to foster academic integrity? So because all I just explained as more or less to detect what already happened, and maybe this is not what we really want and our students want. So maybe we should focus more on how to prevent this fraud and how to teach our students and teachers to behave in a way that this kind of situations do not even exist. So, but this is maybe something that my colleague Henrietta can better explain in her presentation. So I think that I can finish now.
Thanks, Ekaterina. Thanks so much for explaining the OUNL approach here. Any immediate comments or questions for Ekaterina? I was wondering was it, Ekaterina, was it at the OUNL? So when you developed the system, was it needed to have a talk from the management with the student body, or was there a need for a new contract with students? Do you know about this?
This is an interesting question. I don't really know all the details. I can imagine that there were some differences in different faculties and courses, that they apply different strategies how to do it. This is also dependent on the content, of course. No, maybe I should ask.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, what you indicated, was that students have to give consent, which would cover any other agreement, I guess, because they give consent for that specific assessment, which would cover any other paperwork, I guess. And in case students do not consent, they still can go to the study center and do the face-to-face assessment.
Yes, now they have this choice, and I know that during the pandemic, I don't know how long, so it was really prohibited. But simply to make everything possible, so they still applied this online proctoring. And now I don't know, there are still students who prefer online proctoring. They prefer to stay at home, and but there are also, I understood from the evaluation, many students who prefer to go to a study center. And why? Yes, because sometimes they simply feel unskilled to apply this technology, and sometimes they simply afraid that they will make mistakes and their recordings will be seen as invalid. This is what they said, and they simply do not have webcam or something, so they're so there are different reasons why they still go to study center. But I know that quite some change their opinion, so they prefer now to stay at home. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some practical reasons, but also some anxiety for some in relation to the use of technology. Yesterday, but also some examples on that not all students feel comfortable in this online setting. On the other hand, that is by many students, they think the convenience of doing assessment from home is well, a good incentive for further developing it. But the combination, the choice, seems to be the best way of a university to present it. Do online assessment or face-to-face. The combination is very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you don't, the students have a choice. And if you do it online, the transparency, as you indicated, is a very important element. I think that the consent button, well, will exempt every discussion further. When the student consents, then it's fine. I'm also looking, yesterday I mentioned also, because I don't have many examples on that, what happens if a university believes or has technical proof of cheating, and I've not seen a conflict or a dispute on that between a student and the university, because it can sometimes be difficult to prove. And what is being done then? Does the student have to do the exam again in a face-to-face setting, or I don't know, I haven't seen any examples. So if somebody has examples on that, or Ekaterina, then it would be nice, as in addition to our good practices, to see what happens as a consequence of a student being caught cheating on via the technology that we use. We only prevent it, but yeah, what are the consequences? Yeah.
Yes, I do not have any examples. I know that first all recordings are checked by the system, artificial intelligence, and flagged if there is fraud, let's say, and then this flagged recording should be checked by a person, investigator, and if there is wrote. So there's still a question. It goes to the examination board, and they decide what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is an example or something from the examination board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be difficult for the student, but because if the student presses the button consent, then the student also agrees with the consequences. And that could be, even if the student didn't cheat, but yeah, the system, yeah, they use some indications that there could be cheating in place. Yeah, it depends on what conclusion you then take. But I see Tamar wants to step in on this, I guess. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the interesting presentation. And so there was a question that you have mentioned, the best practices. I'm also interested in the same way because I am representing the university, International Black Sea University from Tbilisi, Georgia, and I'm pretty much interested in what happens internationally. And that's a really good experience also for me to listen you. And I also I'm a lecturer here and also quality assurance manager. So we do work on the same issues, and this is the whole problem. I mean, for the universities, and you have mentioned here the practices, what we had. So we do offer, as it was yesterday, you have been discussing that issue. We do offer students both, I mean, hybrid regime in the lectures, and we do have exams face-to-face and also online. And as you have mentioned, Ekaterina, we have also not examination board, but we have students affairs board, and another is the faculty board. So we had the experience of cheating online from the student, and but the lecturer required to retake the exam. But of course, there are pros and cons of this issue. This is the right of the student, and so this question is also very much debatable and up to the conflict. But so here, what happened that the lecturer asked the faculty board to discuss the issue, and so the student had to retake the exam face to face, or it is an option also to have it online. But it depends on the issue and on the topic, as well as the format. I could say the field of the course that we are talking about. So that's a very interesting for me also to hear from you. So the different faculty boards and student boards are also, interesting in that cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Tamar, and an insight in your system. There is an interesting question here from Fabian about statement. You could argue that a student is actually not capable of providing consent freely. You can ask with the button consent, but what is the option for a student that is not taking the consent? Taking a face-to-face exam?
Yes, I guess, yes. So if there are only two options. So.
Yeah, so that's when you have the option of going face-to-face, you can ask for consent for online then, I guess. If you do not have the option because of a full lockdown or so, yeah, asking for consent, the student, really does not have any other options. But okay, that's also.
I'm very interested how they solved this in Spain and Portugal, because initially it was not allowed there to use video recordings. So when we had this full lockdown, so I think it could be a question for them.
So there's also a raised hand by Dimitrios. I don't know if he wants to comment on this particular issue, but maybe you can go ahead, Dimitrios.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Thanks for the very important experience that you're sharing. I'm from Cyprus, European University Cyprus, and I'm a professor in medicine. So we did encounter cases of cheating. We followed a similar pathway. We allowed them to retake the exam, but I have certain questions for the panel and for everybody here. First of all, following this pathway, doesn't it allow students to be more liberal with cheating. It means that online is pretty easy to cheat. We've had students that use their cell phones and they've had their cell phones in front of the screen. They could communicate. And it's very difficult to prove that someone is cheating, meaning we're not investigators. We're not going to say, you know, your eyes were looking on the left or right, or I saw a reflection in your glasses. So we're not going into that pathway. But if we get someone being recorded with her cell phone on and telling them that, okay, retake the exam at the university, isn't that taking a very light pathway, light, demeanor towards cheating? And the other thing is that nowadays our students tend to be very in social media, communicating. It's very easy once the exam is over to discuss and have an interchange of information. So it means that once an exam finishes, the subjects, especially if they're multiple choice or open-ended questions, they are diffused. If you have 100 students or 150 students taking the exam, for sure, they go into their chat lines and they exchange information so they know what was asked, which means that if we ask someone to go and take the same exam at the university, it means that they most probably know the questions and they have the time to prepare the answers. So it's getting more complicated. We have all the goodwill and all the desire to help our students, but when we're talking about high-stake exams, for us, for example, deciding if someone can graduate from medicine will give them rights to practice medicine. So it's something important. We cannot say that, you know, it's okay, we accept a certain level of unsolicited collaboration or cheating. So these are some things that came in mind and I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, what we see is that on the one hand, like is in the chat, you can do several things to make the examination, the assessment room scanned as much as possible. But on the other hand, there are, if you think it is not solid enough of an assessment by doing it at home, you should combine it with continuous assessment. There's several other means, a continuous assessment to reassure that the student really lives up to the learning objectives and not base it on one online examination. But there are many experts here in the room. Maybe someone can step in here and address this this challenge that is just mentioned by Dimitrios. Anyone on experience with continuous assessment, maybe? Otherwise, you have to look into the report of our special interest group. We have several good practices represented there, but of course, the challenge that you indicate here, Dimitrios, is most relevant, and I'm sure we have several good practices to, well, it will never be 100%, but that is also within the physical examinations and traditional examinations also the case. But no further input here, but I guess also Henrietta can later on maybe address this this topic further. Is there any other question for Ekaterina at this moment, or if not, then I would like to thank Ekaterina and for your input. And I just say this already, we are going to share the slides of all the sessions to the registered participants. Thanks so much, Ekaterina. And we then can go ahead with the presentation by Henrietta from UniDistance in Switzerland.
Thank you, George, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I think it's a good example of what, oops, right. Can you see my screen and now without all the pictures?
Yes, the happy birthday is clearly there.
Yes, it's our 30th anniversary. That's the official picture at the moment. It's a very busy one. But I think, so today I think what we're doing is exactly modeling what the university of the future will look like with people coming from all over. We shared our community of practice, and now we're sharing wider across all of Europe and further. Yesterday, Klaus Dieter said, I was talking about the mission my mission was, that I accepted, is to present UniDistance, our approach to online assessment in relation to the questions of trust, privacy and ethics. We already had some discussions yesterday, and we've started again with Ekaterina's talk. But first, a few points about our own university, because I think context is very important in education. It really changes what choices you might want to make. So UniDistance is a distance university. All our students, distance university students. We have 5 faculties: law, psychology, economics, history, and mathematics. And as it's written, we're 30 years old, so we're small and still quite young and growing. We have a little over 2,000 students. We are spread. Most of our students are in Switzerland. We have only, I think, about 200 abroad. So it really is mainly a Swiss university, because until recently we had our students, had to come in presence 5 times for their classes. Obviously that changed when we moved online, and now we're a fully online university. The new teaching strategy is going through at the moment. It's still being discussed. Do we stay 100% at a distance? Do some things happen in person? Do they happen bimodal? All these things are being discussed at the moment and should be decided by the end of the month, we hope. We're a bilingual, sometimes trilingual university. All our faculties are taught in German and in French, separate classes, separate courses, and some of them in English. Our average age is also 38 years old, which makes it very different. Our relationship to our students is very different than a traditional university, where you have 20-year-olds. Sort of our students have jobs, as you can see here. We have a lot of sports people, but most of our students work, have family obligations. Studies come last. They have to work, they have to look after their family, they have to work, and we come in 3rd position, which means that we have to adapt to their life, so to make it possible for them to study. And I think that's something very important for us. The change in us, the evolution of our students, so it's increased more than anything. The curve is steeper since the pandemic, and we're growing at the moment. I belong to the Educational Development Unit in distance learning. We give pedagogical support to the teaching teams. We have developed tools. We ensure quality of the teaching through evaluation, and carry out research. So that's my main job. And so coming on to what does it mean in this environment to create, what it has mean to create e-assessments in this environment, focusing on the issue of trust, as Ekaterina was talking about. So I'm going to talk about what we did to build trust, what we didn't do to build trust, and thinking beyond the process and the technology, perhaps what is the purpose of assessment in a post-digital world. My next slide is exactly the same one as Ekaterina, looking at how do you build e-assessment trust. It's a multi-layered concept, and I don't separate them out, but we've considered all of them. How do we build trust in the system? And I'll start out by presenting the process we've been through now for I think it's the 4th time for online exams, to ensure that there's this trust in our examination system. So building trust means we started by informing and training, then setting up the assessment, carrying out the assessment, evaluating and improving. And we've been using this circle consistently over the last four semesters, I think it's been now. So first, building trust, informing and training. Informing came first from the institution during the pandemic and imposed mainly by the Federation, was no more in-person classes or exams. So we had to move everything online. At the institutional level, we decided that that would happen through Moodle. All exams were taken through Moodle. They had to be announced on Moodle because that's our learning management system, and we could check who was going in. Not everyone has access, obviously. And using existing technologies rather than new technologies, with a declaration of honour at the beginning, and specific to the COVID times, our students were allowed to retake the exams more times than normal. I think normally it's 3 times there. It was more open, much more flexible than normal, usually. So information from the institution, and then for the teaching teams, we carried out, well, we explained the new framework. We wrote a vademecum on remote assessment for students. So what are the main questions they should be asking themselves? What are the different options? How long does it take? Graphs of what it looks like from the teacher point of view, what all the steps he has to do or she has to do to prepare for the exam, and during the exam, what it will look like from the student's perspective. So really to try and give them as clear an idea of what they're getting themselves into, depending on the model they've chosen. Then we created the UniDistance team model exam sections in an open Moodle so that the teachers could go and try out the sections. And depending, so there was a one on written work, manuscript, written work and manuscript, multiple choice questions, and oral examination. So we had the 4 different ones. We showed how it worked. The teachers could practice, and they had all the information they needed. We asked the teachers which model they're going to use, and then we transfer the model section into their own Moodle, so they don't have to prepare that much, sort of everything, all the elements are there. And they had instructions on how to use it in a check sheet, checklist on what they were supposed to, what they needed to do, the parameters in Moodle, things like that. We had fact sheets, FAQs, we gave lots of webinars and lots of individual support. Students also received the information from the institution, what was going to happen on Moodle. They had to announce, the teachers had to announce how the exams were going to be carried out, and tutorials on, for instance, how to do scans for manuscript exams, for example. So they too had tutorials when needed. So that was the preparation ahead of time. Then the setup of the exams, the teaching teams would choose the exams they wanted to do, set them up with our help if they wanted help, and students had mock exams in the same format as they were going to do. Sometimes they were empty, just there was technical, how do I upload a document? But most of the students have been using the technology for a long time, which reassured them it wasn't something completely new. And then we carried out the exams. What is important, so here, I'm sorry, it's in French below, but it was either handing in a work, it can be written on a computer or an Excel sheet or a manuscript. It can, a test in Moodle is multiple choice questions or oral examinations in those order. And you can see the 3 colors are spring 2020, autumn 2020, spring 2021. What we also had, which is very important, is online a hotline. So we have a hotline which has IT, UniDistance people and student services. And this hotline was called between 100 and 200 times in most exams. In effect, there were few real problems. So last weekend we had two cases which were sort of more important, that were real problems. A lot of people called just to make sure their exam was handed in. We go into the system making sure the exams are handed in. We hand them in if they've only put them up as draft, we will call the students and say, did you mean to only leave it as a draft, things like that. So we're very proactive, supportive, calming down people, telling them it's okay if there was a storm, electricity was down for 20 minutes, all these sort of things. So it's important. That's something we'll definitely be keeping all the time. So then what we did is evaluate and see how to improve it. Evaluations, course evaluations, student workshops to hear what their feelings were about it. The hotline, of course, we look at what didn't work. And we carried out research on changes in marks and dropout levels. We had very different results from the team yesterday. I can't remember who had it, Diego or Jose. Saw the grades go up. We saw our grades, so the analysis is very clear. The grades, I need to change there. In this analysis, you can see the dropout level. It didn't change significantly. We did a significance test, and it doesn't change compared to the previous sector. Time, and that has been confirmed over time. Our dropout rate has actually gone down since COVID compared to before. And here we carried out a Mann-Whitney-U test to look at the marks, and they're not statistically different from pre-COVID times. And our grading, the instructions that were given to the teachers was keep the level of what is expected for the students, but we give the students more flexibility. If they don't want to take the test now, they can wait and take it later at no extra cost or disadvantage. This research has been accepted for publication and should be out this year. So improvements on the engineer side, we improved the checklists, the documents, etc. On the teaching team side, we had exchanges of practice amongst the teachers. They often changed their format, tried out new things, tried to increase the amount of continuous education assessment you were mentioning before, George. I think that's one solution. That's an important one, and it's good for students as well because it means they'll work throughout the semester. There'll be less cramming at the end of the semester, hopefully. So lots of different solutions, take home, open book, and so on. So this was the process on how to build e-assessment trust in the technology, trust in what you're going to the process. However, what we didn't do, or did to a limited amount, is heavy proctoring. Technology isn't neutral. It changes our relationship to the students, between the teachers and the students, and proctoring in the university space is definitely not the same as online, as everyone has agreed over the last 2 days. As we know, online proctoring invades student privacy. There fundamental issues with ethical issues linked to the use of AI. Jose yesterday, who's an AI specialist, was mentioning all the biases, the discrimination that happens if you're a woman, if you're a Black woman, the camera will literally not recognize you. So then issues there that are very concerning, and it's difficult to put a student in front of a camera like that. And it doesn't really give a choice, sort of, even if you say, well, you can come in person in a distance university, that's not that easy. Not for everyone. It's also, online proctoring is also expensive, and it doesn't guarantee it works. Again, as Jose mentioned yesterday, spend 2 minutes on the internet, or even better on TikTok. I don't have TikTok, I borrowed it from my daughter, looked on it for 2 minutes, and I could find 10 different ways of, and not necessarily technological ways of bypassing the controls. So online proctoring is a problem for all these aspects, but I think it's also a bigger problem, sort of heavy proctoring. and academic integrity is a fundamental issue and a fundamentally pedagogical issue. It's not a technological one. It's not how to not get caught. It's fundamental that we teach our students that plagiarism is something that is not acceptable, and that manipulating your data is also something that ethically is unacceptable, whether in university or afterwards. And so we should take it, I think, as more than just trying to catch the people who are teaching. We need to, and I'm sure most universities, or all our universities do it, but we need to teach students that it's much more than that. So that's one aspect. There's another aspect as well of trusting relationships. As a student, I need to be able to trust my teacher. I need to be able to trust my institution. If I'm going to take the risk of interacting in class, people often say, yeah, no one talks up, no one dares talk. Often they're frightened. They're frightened of making a mistake. They're not sure of the reactions of their peers and of the teacher. To ensure interaction, to ensure risk-taking, to make sure students can allow themselves to make mistakes or to be open to feedback, we need the trust of our students. And if we start from a point of view of controlling, with already putting into the relationship the fact that we don't trust our students. And I think that's a point we need to take into account. I understand completely, I agree completely that we have to make sure that that it's very important that students don't cheat and that we know who the authors are. But I think it's very important to not take the point of view that they're cheating. Most of our students do not come here to cheat. Most of our students, they've chosen to come. It's not 20-year-olds who are sent by their parents because they don't know what to do. It's people who are taking time off from their works, spending all their weekends doing this. They really want to learn. So I think from that point of view, it's trusting relationships need to be put in the center of our thoughts. And another point is what works and what is desirable. The means and the ends are constitutively related in education. You can't separate them out. In this case, you can't beat someone to teach him something because you're teaching two things at the same time. They might teach the right answer, but you're also teaching that people in power can use violence. So you need to think of the way you're teaching, because we're not only teaching the content, we're also teaching a way of being in society. And I think in a surveillance society, as we are now, think of yourselves. These are examples. I'd heard and read a lot about online proctoring. I didn't know that the same thing was happening in companies. And it's not only happening in call centers, it's happening for lawyers, for instance. I heard an example for journalists, where you're monitored, and if you can have a look on this page, it shows the boss is following there's a screenshot after every minute. They're tracking everything that's typed. Your mouse is tracked. Everything is invisible. It's happening behind the scene. And here you get a report at the end of what your employees have been doing. Can you imagine that happening to you? And do you really want us to teach our students that that's okay? So we have to be careful with this. It doesn't mean I don't think we should control anything, but it does mean we need to think about it very, very carefully, what the message is, what the sort of culture we're giving to them. So a careful approach to surveillance. In our case, we haven't had any external online proctoring services. We have a lot more open book exams. A lot more choice, if you let the student choose a topic, for one, it will be much more interesting for the student and for you to read, and they'll take something that's context specific to them. It will be much more difficult to find it on Google. Low stakes continuous assessment, you were mentioning before. I always think it's strange that people think that continuous education assessment is better. There could be the same problem of cheating. It's just, if you make it lower stakes, I think it helps. And yeah, I think that's perhaps the solution to make everything lower stakes. So it's not as important. You're not playing your life each time you take an exam. There's ways of doing it with multiple choice questions, scrambling them, limited time, etc. Oral exams, everyone say they take a lot of time. In fact, correcting a paper takes a lot of time as well. That might be a solution. And what we did, we used oral exams as a backup to written exams. If there was anything suspicious, teachers were allowed to put in their instructions that they were always allowed to do an oral exam to make sure the student really had their knowledge. So that could be a possibility to ensure, to check on what the students know, or perhaps to have the two, a written one or followed by a short oral one. Know your students. That's another way. If you have blogs, if you have scaffolded projects all along the semester, you know your students very well. You followed, you know their writing, you know their style, you know their interests. You'll have, you're in them with the learning process. So that's another way of doing it. As Carol wrote, and it's cited in Ross and McLeod, design out plagiarism rather than trying to catch it. Make so that that's not really the option, that students want to learn. We did have some, so we do use a plagiarism app, and we do have some Zoom in some exams, but it's one camera of Zoom, and it's actually quite nice to have because it means the teachers can communicate directly with the students. Otherwise, we have a problem of communication. If something happens during the exam, we can't communicate with them. So Zoom has been a useful exam tool, I mean, during the exams. Now, I want to think, okay, we've been looking at the technology side, the processes, how we've done it, but shouldn't we be going beyond online or on-campus assessments? Should we be really opposing the two? For one, for example, cheating happens in both cases. But more positively, in both cases, we now use computers very often. In both cases, you can work on a Google Sheet. In both cases, you can do real things. You can still go to, this is a picture of the cathedral in Basel. You can tell one of your students to go to the local church and analyze it. I've seen psychology courses in our university where they ask students to go out and interview people, get their data and work on their data. Very difficult to fake all this. So we no longer live in a digital or non-digital world. We really live in a post-digital world, which means it doesn't mean that technology is gone. It's more in the sense of post-colonialism, post-modernism. We're taking it with us. The digital is there, it's in our lives every day, it's entangled and we can't separate it out. And shouldn't we be thinking of assessment in a slightly different way? And so I wanted to ask you a few questions about that. What is the purpose of assessment? If you can go on Mentimeter, I can give you the link in the chat. And I might be able to put the image. I'm not sure whether it's going to work. Yes. You might be able to read the QR code if that's better. And can you see the Mentimeter screen on my screen?
No, not yet. We see the QR code.
Okay, so it hasn't come before. I'll have to stop the sharing and share again. Is it gone? I've lost my sharing there. There.
Yeah, there. Yeah, now it's visible.
Thank you.
Yes, I encourage you to contribute to the Mentimeter.
So testing their understanding, making sure they, how proficient they are, how much knowledge they've gained. Assess learning and teaching, so the teacher's side as well is important. The teachers get feedback on how their course was understood. Feedback for all learners, teachers and administrators in this case. Assessing the understanding of the material, not just surface learning, yes, depending on how your test is made. Oop. Okay, my screen is moving by itself now. Yeah. Are you? Show students how they can improve. It has to be used for next time. Demonstrate student reach, anything. So, sorry, I've lost my presentation.
Close the Mentimeter first.
Yeah. I've got another one, so I'll just leave it up because I've got another question afterwards. So you mentioned mainly it's checking whether the understanding of the students. There's lots of different sorts. There's also diagnostic to know where they stand at the beginning of the class, formative to give them feedback that was mentioned, sort of to help them understand and move forward, or summative at the end of a course. It's also, might share so we can see each other. It also has to do looking at the work from Baud, I'm not sure how you say his name, and Carles. It's also a lot to do with the student knowing what level, what is expected, what level the student should have, the student being able to assess it, him or herself. Informing future work is important, as was mentioned, and allowing the teacher to improve. One thing that wasn't really mentioned was helping the student learn. The assessments, basically, assessments are what determine what the student's going to learn and how the student is going to learn. So it's really central to all the learning process. And I think from that point of view, we need to pay a lot of attention to what the assessments look like. And a multiple choice at the end of the course might not be not lead to all the learning aspects or the competencies you're hoping to develop during the course. I think that's important to think about as well. Then also one question that would be interesting to consider is, what does cheating look like? I think it's important to think about what is cheating. Is working with other people cheating? In my work, if I don't work with other people, I definitely get bad reviews at the end of the year. I need to work with other people. Is looking up things on the internet now bad practice? If we didn't do that in our work, it would not be acceptable. So I understand that sometimes we need to know things without looking them up, but other times we need perhaps to think about, what does our work look like today? What authentic works we do? What do we expect? What, as a professional in our area, what are we expected to know? And apply that to our assessments. Look at our assessments from those points of view. Also yesterday it was fun was mentioned, making things interesting, fun, relevant to our students, so that if they choose the subject they're studying, if they're applying it to their company or to their city or to the environment in which they are, they'll be doing something very personal that's not available out there that they can copy or even want to copy. And all this can be very challenging. I think it's important, again, it was mentioned yesterday, the 10K, you want it to be like the 10, running a 10K or running a marathon. It's hard, it's tough, but at the end, you're super proud of your work, and you can only be proud of your work if you did it. So these are the points I wanted to highlight. Just one last slide. Sorry, I need to go out. This. Nearly there. It's not showing up. Is this the right? Oh.
No, I can't. We can't.
No,
see,
it's not picking it up again, and I don't know why. Okay, well, I'll just say it. It doesn't matter. What I want to come back to is the main question you want to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of this assessment? What is the purpose of your whole program? What is the purpose of your module within the program? What are we trying to get the students to learn? What skills and competencies do I want my students to show? What do I want my students to learn? And remain motivating. So give autonomy, competence, relatedness. Autonomy, let the students choose competence at their level, and relatedness, make it related to them. Make it also group work, that can be another form. But I think these are the important questions to go back to. And I think, as very often in digital education, we come back to the questions that are fundamental to what we're trying to achieve in our work. And these are what make it interesting, and this is what we need to ask in the context of assessment as well. So thank you for your.
Thanks so much, Henrietta. Really interesting points and highlights that you presented there. A lot of food for thought, also, especially the balancing act between trust and guaranteeing also the value of a solid assessment system. To my mind, it comes like and of course, I would also promote say trust is an important basis to get the best out of people, to get them really coming forward also into the academic process and the learning process. Trust is important. And then the moment there is an assessment, the trust is gone. So that's a bit of conflict there. But if we would promote, like say, doing online assessment without the a more strict supervision, you should also do that then in the face-to-face and dismiss the supervisor and just have an open room where people can take an examination anytime and fill it in. It doesn't sound really like this is going to happen also, and so it should then be both ways. If we are so trustful, then we should also practice that in the face-to-face assessment. So I have to think about that as well, if that would be realistic. So there's really a balancing act that I see here, and the question about what for are we organizing assessment? What do we want to get out of it? That is stays, of course, the most important element in assessing what are, and find also the right, the correct assessment tool to assess the learning outcomes. So we know that we have expertise for that in face-to-face assessments. We know how to assess the way to see what learning outcomes are, what is achieved by the student, but also need to translate that also in different tools, probably in an online assessment. That is also a specific expertise.
I think, can I say just one thing? You said we don't we don't check them. If we don't check them online, then we shouldn't be supervising them offline. Often we don't supervise our students. When they're writing an essay, when they're doing a research paper, we don't supervise them.
Yeah. No, indeed, it is very much comparable there, and like I say, with the balance, everybody needs to find their own balance, and also I see cultural differences there in different countries in their approaches. On the other hand, we also need to prevent that when we are dedicated online universities or working with online, that we have the same trust and value of the achieved qualifications, of course. So that it's not like the perception from others than within the own university is that online universities with online examinations are of less quality because it is not guaranteed. So we have to keep that in mind, even if we strongly believe in the trust position. Yeah, anyone, because that was really interesting, Henrietta, and I guess some of you would like to comment on this, what was addressed here. Spielman, just checking the chat in the meantime. Anyone to maybe take the floor also by the microphone, further explaining what they said in the chat?
I'm George Moerkerke from the Open University of the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Well, it was a very interesting talk, and I think all the balancing act is in it, because, well, as I have sometimes to advise as an assessment advisor people who have 900 students in a course, and some people have about 40 or 60 students in a course. So there you have the balance between scalability and what you want to do with students. And also I found interesting the discussion about, well, for me, grading is part of our legal obligation. So we have the trust I look for is the trust society has in our grades. So that's the other kind of trust. And sometimes I think there is the big difference between testing for learning and testing for certification. And to be honest, at the Open University, we do the latter. All our examination procedures are looking for the most robust certification processes. So you have all the interesting elements in it for me. I don't see anyone anymore, so I don't know whether you hear me, George.
Yes, we can see and hear you clearly. Yeah. No.
So thanks, and we're. I don't think it's going to end today, this discussion.
No, and I think the difference you indicate, like assessing, learning or assessing for certification, is really also important to indicate what kind of instruments or approaches are used in the assessment. Anyone on this further experiences to be shared? New thoughts and insights? No? Then I think it was all clear, and we accept that we are not going to solve everything this afternoon, which was not the goal of the session, but it certainly presented new insights, and which are important for making progress on further looking into online assessment. That leaves me then by thanking Ekaterina and Henrietta for your contributions this afternoon. It was really interesting again, and then I want to announce for tomorrow that we have the third and last session on the operational processes, which is mainly covered by Carlton Wood of the Open University UK and Kirsi Saarinen from Tampere University, in which we get some outlines on the operational processes, technology and support, and also some good examples there. So thank you all for attending this session, and we hope to see you back tomorrow, where we can continue the discussion further. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.